actually, we've heard, is actually matching the URI size. So she's a great inspirational leader, educator, curriculum writer, instructional designer, grassroots organizer, part of the founding group of Women for Guatemala, executive director of the Charter for Compassion International. So let's give very warm welcome to Marilyn Turkovic, and I'll have to check and see. Marilyn,
I'm
please.
here, yes.
Yeah, you're here. Okay, now I can see you. Wonderful. So we'll start the panel discussion with Marilyn, and then we have Samira, and then we have Morgana and my humble self following this youth. And so, Marilyn, if you could please grace our panel discussion with sharing little bit of the history that now, we see yourself and we see all the fruits, wonderful fruits of your hard labor and sacrifice for so many years, bringing all these wonderful specialists together to share the compassion with the whole planet and create compassionate cities and many other things. But we want to go to the roots, and because there are no fruits without roots. How it all started. How
Okay.
did you decide to dedicate yourself? What happened? How did you decide to dedicate yourself to helping to resolve conflict?
I just want to mention that the Charter for Compassion started in 2009. It was an idea by a British historian, theologian, Karen Armstrong, who many of you might know for her writings. And she was the very first person that the TED organization awarded a financial prize to. And her wish with the TED organization of TED Talks was to create a charter for compassion, because she really thought that the only thing that as a people we had left was compassion for one another. So I just wanted to share that with you because it really is the structural base of the Charter for Compassion. And consequently, what happened after she won that award, the TED organization decided that what they wanted to do was to open up the question, what should be on a Charter for Compassion? And say they put it online. And when they did that, almost 180,000 people came forth and gave their ideas about what they thought was compassion. And then it was synthesized and brought into a document that's just a little over 360 words. But the essence of the document is the golden rule. And so as we move forth, do unto others as you would wish them to do unto you. That is something that's at the very core of how we operate. And I think that, yes, we are all influenced by activities in our lives and events that surround us. And I think that I certainly was. And I believe that, being a child of the 60s and with all of the turmoil that was happening, not only in the United States, but in the world at the time, but especially starting with the civil rights movement, and that was civil rights for recognition of all citizens of the United States, especially our Black population, to have equal rights. But then it really did revolve and evolve into a number of other rights. And so the rights of women, the rights of indigenous, the rights of animals, And then the Vietnam War started, and obviously a war that really made the globe begin to decide, what is it that we need to do? And, so many have taken their lead about peace and peaceful action from Gandhi, so that, as we look at his own life and his devotion to ahimsa, where, the daily practice of really living peace in order to stop war was really, I'm not going to say it was a mantra, but it was a real important part of the actions that people took um, as really what they wanted to do in life. And so, when we look at peace, we can't avoid looking at love. And so that you can only have peace if you have love. The thing is that, how extensive is that love? It has to start with the self. And so that, as you learn to be mindful and self-compassionate for yourself, then it's at that point that you can begin that journey to go beyond yourself and begin the process of building peace. And it's such a huge subject. You know, the first thing, as Gandhi taught us, is that we need to move for justice for all creatures, humans and animals. And obviously, we have learned that there needs to be peace in the environment as well. The other thing that he challenged us with, and we've seen this play out over and over again in many parts of the world, and that's self-rule. How important is it to have self-rule, to take, the to wrap your arms around what is happening within your own country. And then the other thing is really promoting, honoring, and sharing your local economy. And the last thing is that whole concept that we all grabbed hold of, which was nonviolent revolution. But as we look at peace building, I think that what we need to do is to think and move, as I mentioned, from the personal to the social. And then we need to really consider, how is it that we move to the institutional? Um, and then the last is the political. Um, and one other thing, and that is that peace has to start locally. Um, And if we can start building peace within our own communities, within our own neighborhoods, we can then begin to reach out to our government. Um, so I think I'm going to stop there because I think we're going to have questions. But I thought that I would try and provide that little bit of a structure from where we might start our conversations.
Thank you very much,
Mhm.
Marilyn. It's wonderful to know where you're coming from, and there is so much thought and effort have been put into this work. And so now we will ask our yesterday's facilitator and one of the multi-region coordinator, Samira, to share her thoughts, because actually this is her heart and soul, peace building and conflict transformation. As we know, as some of us know, she comes from the area which was torn by the war, and she knows about the conflict and disasters brought about by the conflict, not from from somebody else. She saw that personally. She witnessed all this, and obviously motivation to do something about peace building and conflict transformation must be very strong with you, Samira. So floor is yours. Please share how it all came to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's interesting to switch roles today and to be in the role of a panelist. I'm very happy to be able to share a small fragment of my experience when it comes to peace building and conflict transformation. As Brother Sagaraswamy mentioned, I was born in a country that is called Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a tiny country in southeastern Europe, which back in the 90s of the past century was torn by the dissolution of Yugoslavia and a conflict which sort of escalated, and it started to rain war on all of us. I was born in 1994, so I was born at the end of the war, living my first life, a year of life in war, and then my whole life afterwards, even today, has been marked by, well, unfortunately, the conflict that we have all been through. And so my professional growth went into the direction of me pretty much choosing that I want to deal with it, even though it's not the prettiest thing to do in this whole world, but it's very it gives you a lot back. So I'm happy with the work that I'm doing. And speaking about my own context and how all of this came about, speaking about peace building and conflict transformation, we have to be aware that different societies across the world need to be engaged in different processes. My country has been through a whole lot because according to the theory of Johan Galtung, who is pretty much the father of peace building, one of my personal role models when it comes to speaking and sort of working in the field of peace building, he differentiates between three different fields, which is peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. So right after the war, my country was launched into the phase, actually it was interrupted by the phase of peacemaking. They needed to make peace with the Dayton Peace Accord, which was signed in the United States, in order for the war to stop. Right after that, the next phase was peacekeeping. They needed to preserve peace. And right now we're in the peace building phase where we're supposed to using different entities, civil society, government, education, healthcare, and all other segments of our society. We're supposed to strive to building peace. I live in a zone where peace has a very strange meaning because people locally say as long as there's no shooting, we're living in peace because of the analogy and the connection to the previous war. However, I disagree with it because I strongly think that there's a difference between positive and a negative peace. Positive peace is prevalent in societies where you have equal opportunities, justice, security, where the negative peace is still sort of just the absence of war, from what I was able to sort of uncover through my work. And in speaking about conflict, conflict as such is usually characterized as something negative, but according to literature, it's not. Conflict as a notion, as a concept, is neither positive or negative. Our treatment of the conflict can evolve to be a positive or a negative one. A conflict can be an opportunity for us to transform the current experience. I live in the part of the world where conflicts never had it a positive and headed in a positive direction. However, in transforming conflicts, it's very important for us to understand the conflict as such. And with this brief explanation, I will sort of close my presentation for today. From the position where I sit at this particular moment in URI, which implies me assisting global grassroots organizations with their work. A lot of times their activities are dealing with some kind of conflict, either prevention, either transformation, or sort of conflict, learning more about the conflict. And one of my favorite methods to share with people that will enable us to understand conflict a little bit better is the iceberg method. Can we all try to imagine an iceberg right before our eyes and how it all actually looks like? So there's the level of water here, and then there's a tiny iceberg on the top that's visible. And then everything, the rest is underneath the water and we cannot see it. And speaking about conflict, conflict is all of the scenery that we're just imagining in our heads right now. So the top part that we actually see and usually understand about conflicts is what is just visible. So that's the position in a conflict. And usually people try to solve any conflict in this area. So what they see, they try to resolve it. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, this did not work. In the whole region, this did not work because the core of the problem is not visible there and there is no solution there. When we dig deeper into the waters, go a little bit beyond, we will be able to see the interests in this conflict. And conflict can be resolved in the interest part of it. But however, if we go deeper, we will see the needs. And the needs are the segment of the conflict where we need to start resolving it. Speaking about this very openly and honestly and engaging in truthful conversations and meaningful dialogue will help us sort of unpack any conflict around us, either in our personal lives or in our professional lives, because I assume that a lot of people on this call are somewhat engaged in peace building, trying to address conflict on what it seems to be on the surface not likely happening. Going to the next level, to the interest part, there is a possibility, but really understanding the needs of the parties involved in the conflict will get us so far in the future. And so this is what I've been trying to do in my local work through a cooperation circle of URI called Youth for Peace, which actually introduced me to URI. And this is what I try to advise the groups and individuals that I work with, either through URI or through my local work, that we need to understand one another in the needs department, not just on the surface. So what's happening on the surface, digging deeper into individuals and digging deeper into conflicts will help us understand them better and offer better solutions. So thank you for listening. I hope that my contribution to the panel will be useful for your future work, but I'm looking forward to talking more about this in the groups.
Thank you very much, Samira. Very heart-touching explanation and very deep explanation of the conflict, how it all is happening and how it's structured. So we'll be asking Morgana, who is very special personality because she is not just one of the global trustees for multi-region, but she is very special spiritual practitioner because she comes from one of the native traditions, and actually earth and nature are very close to her soul, and naturally she has great interest in peace building and conflict transformation, and she's engaged in so many different areas, including environment and dealing with diverse people and cultures. And she's been also instrumental in creating a multi-cooperation circle, planetary well-being. So without further ado, we'll ask our dear Morgana to share how it all started for you. How did you develop so much interest in what you're doing and went, so far on your journey, please?
Yeah. First of all, I'm very honored that you have invited me to partake in this particular afternoon, or evening, or morning, where everybody is. When you said the subject that was going to be dealt with today was peace building and conflict transformation, I had to start thinking as well for myself, what do we mean by these terms, peace building? So I started thinking again, how has this affected me in my life? I came actually from what often people call now the baby boomers. I was actually not so much a product, but I became very much aware of the effects of war. So my very early life was already being marked by the effects of war and how people can actually reconciliate after one of the most horrific wars the world had ever seen. And although I grew up in England, and my parents were actually not old enough to actually partake in the war itself, of course their families were. And so I was born into a country which was still, you know, dealing with food on rations. So my early childhood was something which I remember my parents being hopeful. So I was always surrounded by this sense of hope, but also the throes of war. I remember going to school, and even in the school periods, I was already considering things like these philosophical questions, but I never got the right answers, never got one of the right answers. Yesterday, when we were talking about education, I said to the group I was in, you know, when I was at school, I really wanted to be a priestess. When everybody would ask me, I realized at the time that perhaps a priestess wasn't the thing I was going to be the most successful at, in the sense of within the structure of you know, coming out of a war period. But I thought at the time, the best thing I can do is become a teacher, because that will give me perhaps the tools to start understanding why. What is it about people who feel so much hate towards each other that will, and as a child, I just couldn't understand why people couldn't just play together. But I saw it even at school. But what I saw happening was that children were not influenced by what was happening around them, but they were often influenced by their parents. And so to me, I realized that hate actually comes from people who cannot let go. And I was struggling with these ideas as a very young child. And when I started thinking about, but how have people worked in the past? So my interest was already whetted in a way to start traveling. I think at a very, very early age. I also learned how to travel in a way as our people of the earth. That's why I think I became very involved with paganism, because I realized that we can use our faculties, and I'll talk about these faculties later. But I think at a very early age, I realized that to understand why and how people work, we really have to be prepared to engage. So I think my ideas of peace building, informing people, engaging with people, entering dialogue, started at a very early age. I was also, for a long period in my life, at a very early age, I was actually in hospital. I was hospitalized because I had problems with my hips. At that time, I was in hospital for 2.5 years. I was in quarantine. And when my mother came to visit me, because they couldn't, again, we were living in a very, you know, a period of social reform, social developments, and my parents had no money. And my mother could only visit me like once every 2 weeks. But she said to one of the nurses, how is Leslie? That's my real name. How is Leslie doing? And one of the nurses said, she's always so happy. She must have invisible friends. when my mother told me this, I thought, how do you mean invisible? They were never invisible to me. And I think I learned at a very early age to communicate on what we call these inner journeys, like shamans. So when I started thinking later about what do I really want to achieve in life, what I say, the thing that I really, really wanted to do was to be a priestess, because I hoped by understanding spirituality, by having this conversation with the gods, with the shamans, nature spirits, that I would be able to do work on earth now. I realized I wasn't looking for a revelation or redemption. I knew at an early age, if I wanted to do something, then I had to do it in the here and now. But it also meant that this sense of time, that I could look back, I could look forward. As human beings, we have this unique facility to be able to move in different dimensions. And when I started realizing that part of the peace building process is also the ability to be able to engage in dialogue. So how did I get involved in paganism? You mentioned that I was part of, my tradition is part of the native religions. It's actually Wicca. But how did I become involved in the first place? Now, one of the main things was music. I would listen to some of the texts of the in the 60s, of course, we had the whole hippie movement, peace and love. But many of the songs and the protest songs were very, very influential. But at one point, I had to start thinking about, what am I going to do as a profession? And that's when I did decide to go and be a teacher. I thought the priestess bit will come later. I knew if I was able to have the qualifications and learn how to be a teacher, then I would probably be able, that would be a key to many and open many doors. And that's actually what happened. I did train and I became a qualified teacher. And in 1974, I actually moved to the Netherlands because I wanted to travel. I still wanted to learn more about different cultures, but of course I was still seeking and learning how to be a priestess in between all of the classical education. I still wanted, so I was in a sense self-taught because I think, as I say, at an early age, I already had this ability to move at different levels, but also different forms of consciousness. When I started traveling, I also realized, of course, language is a big stumbling block, because if you can't speak the local language, you have to find different ways of conversing. And that was another thing that I learned very quickly, was that even if we cannot speak the local language, we can still speak with our heart. And many people would say to me, you speak with your eyes. Your eyes are just so inspiring, and they'd be kind of drawn. So when I started traveling, I was saying yesterday that when I started traveling, I would always make sure I had a flute with me, a recorder. And when if I was just waiting at a train station or wherever, I'd get out my flute, and then we'd start, children would always come in, even adults, and they'd all start, and we'd either start chanting, or they would start singing, or start moving. And in that sense, I realized as well that learning by actually engaging in some form of activity was also the way that we were going to be able to help ourselves to reconcile ourselves in moments when we have deep grief, but also those moments when we have great joy. But it's often a way of saying, but how do we speak this common language? Again, I will talk about this a little bit more when we're talking about using spiritual techniques, but I realized that if we are going to be involved in something like peace building, when people have still many feelings of hate, and thinking back to when I was again in England in demonstrations, and thinking back of how the throes of war still affected. When I started traveling, there was still a huge amount of anti-German sentiment. There was a lot of anger about what had happened. Of course there was. But could I blame the Germans I was meeting? I had to find a way as well of reconciling the fact that, can we blame the people who have survived or the people who have been born after? These are also questions I had to wrestle with myself in how far do we make that mistake, in a sense, of trying to find somebody to blame. And this is something that I learned again very quickly. And when I was listening to Samira, although I've never been involved in war, I recognize that when we listen and when we talk to people who have stories about what it was like, then there are ways in which we can empathize. So again, learning more about nature religions, learning about different cultures, gave me those tools actually to participate at least in the conversation. So I'd like to leave it there for the moment. I'm sure there'll be many, many other questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margona. A very touching story, especially story with your flute and playing the flute. Actually, someone was asking if you have the flute with you.
Somewhere.
Okay, wonderful. So, and now I guess I'll have to ask Sagar Swami, what happened to him? How did he came to the idea of getting involved with peace building and transformation? And so he'll have to say that actually I was realizing the importance of conflict resolution after I joined our Hare Krishna movement, because funny enough, even though we are perceived as very peaceful people, but still there are many unresolved conflicts, both internal and external amongst our members. And I was trying to do that as a layman, and then I realized I've got to go get a professional training. So I got trained as mediator by someone who learned Harvard style of mediation and resolving. And then interesting thing happened. I told one of my spiritual mentors that now I'm trained mediator and I could professionally resolve any conflict. And he said, fine, I think I have a job for you. And then he actually threw me at the really deep end. He gave me the conflict to resolve, which had 5 disputing parties, 3 court cases, death threats, and more than 20 years of history of the conflict. And I was just a freshman. I just learned the theory. I had no idea where I'm getting myself into. And a little bit, connecting to the second question, using the spiritual technology, I tried everything on the book. I've learned nothing worked. And people were actually threatening to kill each other. And these were all spiritual practitioners. Funny enough, these things do happen. And so I didn't know what to do. I even went against the rules. I started preaching to them. This was the last thing they wanted to hear. And it even made things worse. And then I've realized, okay, I cannot do nothing. And then I just, told the Lord, I'm really sorry, I failed. I couldn't do anything. It's all in your hands. I started praying. And then miraculously, everything got resolved. And I realized, the prayers are so powerful. And so this was my story, how we went, how I believed in spiritual technologies behind the practical tools, because many times, no matter what we do, because our powers are so limited, but the powers above us are unlimited. And if we learn to tap into those powers and help other people to do that, then we'll really have huge transformation on a global scale. So this is what I'm believing in. And I don't want to take too much of the time because, unfortunately, we're limited. So we wanted to go back to Marilyn again, and maybe you could share a few words, literally in a minute or two, to be brief, to give maximum time for personal discussions in smaller groups. What do you think, how spiritual technologies are helping you in your life and in your peace building work? How are you connecting with supreme powers above us in your work? Please unmute yourself.
I think that, I work with so many people, and it's a gift to be able to be connected to people. But I find that, taking moments of just focusing and moments of self-reflection and mindfulness before each conversation, before wrestling with a new issue or a new dilemma, is really important. And I truly believe that there are so many facets to peace and understanding peace and how you relate to it and how you commit to it. And I was very touched by what Samira was saying to us. And I was making notes, and I was just thinking, my roots, my family roots, go back to the former Yugoslavia, and how touched I have been by the war, the dissolution of the country. And I think that what we all need sometimes to do is to learn as much as we can. I mentioned yesterday in education that we need to expand our perspective consciousness and embrace people outside of our immediate circle. Now we call it the bubble, a bubble of safety during COVID. And when Morgana spoke about really, the fact that the acknowledgement of languages and how important languages are to us, and dialects as well, and how she managed in her travel to really make that association with people. And I'm going to go back to and I don't know how this reflects with spiritual technology, but that whole notion of liking and loving people, and loving most definitely. If I think that's the secret of peace, and secret of peace within the house in which you live, the family that you associate with, the community in which you love. And you know, I think the other thing, and then I'll stop, is the ability to ask questions, not to make assumptions, but to ask questions of one another. I mean, there are some crazy things going on in this world, and in the United States, you know, it's a new dawning of really outrageous behavior. But if we're going to get anywhere, we have to ask questions of one another. And that is a skill that many of us have not practiced very much. And so I would just say that that might be a stepping stone to everything that we've been talking about today.
Thank you very much, Marilyn, for sharing and so wonderfully reflecting on what other panelists shared. So we will ask our next panelist, Samira, because I know Samira, besides her responsibilities in URI and in the CC, is very sincere spiritual practitioner. She practices her Islam and she really loves Allah. And maybe you could share how your spirituality helped you in your work of peace building and conflict transformation.
Well, I would really like to say that a lot of the things that you, Saraswami, and Morgana and Marilyn mentioned, that I relate to a lot of it. And how does my spiritual grounding helps me is it helped me overcome severe fear that comes with peace building in a post-conflict country. And in general, we like to imagine peace building and interfaith and conflict transformation as something really beautiful. But we often forget that in some parts of the world, speaking the truth and speaking against the injustices can be very dangerous. And I've been blessed to got to know a lot of peace builders across the world that whose lives have been threatened and endangered, but still they continue because there is the higher goal to what they do. And so my spirituality and my faith has emboldened me and empowered me into pretty much continuing doing the lunatic work that I'm doing, because there is something powerful about kneeling just before one supreme being, or surrendering myself to oneness rather than being afraid of everything and everyone around me. There is something that sort of gives me strength and power in knowing that there's just one supreme being in this world who can influence my life in such a way. And so that gave me a lot of courage, I would say, and a lot of sass in dealing with people that wanted to misuse religion, faith, spirituality, because no matter how our own spirituality is being used for good, we have to be aware that a lot of conflicts around the world are being fueled by misinterpretation of faith and religion. And sort of my own rebellion against it is to know my spirituality and to know what fuels my spiritual being inside of this physical manifestation of myself. And that gives me a lot of strength in doing what I do. And through URI, even before coming to URI as a Cooperation Circle member, I learned some things about interfaith cooperation and interreligious dialogue. However, until URI, that was just a way of sort of talking to people. But through URI, I've learned that my personal sort of compass for interfaith has changed a little bit. Before, that was just one way of having dialogue, but now interfaith is one of the most, like, an absolute necessity for my work, because I think that it brings a specific sentiment, and it's wonderful to work with people that understand higher values and higher morals and authority. It's just something different of like working with them. And that has been a blessing that I got to learn through URI rather than through my local work. So that's where I stand on spirituality and how it helps me on a daily basis, I would say.
Thank you very much, Samira. It's really wonderful example. You're showing really wonderful example how you moved from faith to interfaith, and we understand that interfaith is something only very mature, very seasoned spiritual practitioners can do, because others, they are locked into their own little box. So thank you for going all the way through the journey since you were 13. Your wonderful example. So we will ask our next panelist to share with us. Morgana, if you could please share how you use your spiritual technology in helping to transform the conflicts.
Pleasure. To me, interfaith is a way of life. It's inter. It's not multi-faith, which tends to be the faiths alongside each other. But we're talking about here about interfaith. I think people forget that. So for me, interfaith has always really been a way of life, simply because I'm interested, but not just interested from an intellectual point of view about learning about different religions, but I'm actually open-minded enough to actually partake in a cultural sense. One of the things I've learned actually is when I am having these conversations, to approach many traditions from a cultural point of view is less threatening than if I ask somebody what their religion is. But if I ask them what they do and what their culture is, then the opening is much more easy to, because again, as I'm just saying, that the sharing of knowledge, it should not be one of my God is better than yours. And unfortunately, that still prevails. And of course, we're often proud of our own religion. But the moment that we go into my God is better than your God, then the conversation stops. Well, it does for me anyway. It really stops, because I can't do anything. I can't say yes or no. So what I mentioned earlier about this common language, sometimes we are actually the voice of those who can't speak. So we're not just talking about a common language. Is not just using words, but a common language is also, again, this idea of being able to find different methods of communication. And of course, some of the, from a political point of view, some people can't or daren't speak. So often, especially in within URI, I feel that I am the voice of those who cannot speak. So of course, the verbal side is very important, and the language I use within that interfaith arena, if you like, is also very important, because I realize as well, sometimes I have to go a little bit further in meeting somebody because they haven't got the expertise or the knowledge, or for whatever reason, we sometimes have to go a little bit further to almost entice somebody, to ask them to share their stories. Again, this is a thread that always goes through. Now, how do we share our stories on a day-to-day basis? For me, one of the main things about practicing my own nature religion, whatever you want to call it, is the importance of our rituals in our spiritual, but also in our mundane lives. But doing the rituals also depends on acknowledging and really taking on board various cycles. The most evident and the most the one that is the most obvious, but everybody forgets, or most people, I can't say everybody. There you go again. Use of language, not everybody. A lot of people forget the moon, the lunar cycle. And when people say to me, oh, how can I really understand what you're talking about? And I say, first of all, you get it, you start a magical diary, and you observe the moon every day. You just sit down, a few minutes, look outside. Where's the moon? Can I see it? What's happening? And it's amazing how many people, when they realize that the moon has such a huge influence on our lives, think about flow, the tides, which are controlled by the moon. The influence of the moon is so gigantic. And, you know, like 76% of our whole body is water. So if the moon can move the tides, then how is the moon going to affect us? Now, all the growing process. And the strange thing is that virtually all religions, especially the Abrahamic religions, actually base their calendars on the moon calendar. If you think about Ramadan, if you think about calculating Easter, Passover, many of those festivals are all calculated by the moon. So one of the first things that, if anybody wants practical advice on understanding how the world works, start a diary and start following the moon. Also, the solar cycle is very important. And of course, then we start realizing the whole seasonal cycle is extremely important. Now, the seasonal cycle can be very different depending on where you live. The moon tends to be, the full moon tends to be the full moon wherever you are. The sun follows a very specific course as well, depending whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. But the seasonal cycle can be extremely different. For example, if I'm celebrating a spring ritual in Norway, it's going to be very different than celebrating a spring ritual in Italy. These seasonal rituals is a way of following, is again to make the connection that was so sadly missing with nature. Because once we start realizing how much influence the moon has on us, on the whole growth process, then we can start looking at the seasonal cycle in a very different way. We can see how spring soon, we're just seeing now, we've just celebrated the full moon, which we call in our system snow moon. And we've also just celebrated the festival of St. Bridget, or what we called Imbolc. Literally means in the belly, for those who want to know where the Irish word comes from. We use many of the Irish Celtic words in our practice. So what do we do in these rituals? And this is what I was just going to come on now. When we talk about the importance of rituals, what is a ritual? A ritual is a moment. First of all, we have to prepare for it. I always say that the preparation for a ritual is actually one of the main ingredients of a successful ritual, because in preparing for a ritual, you're already making the connection. I say you can never experiment with rituals, because a ritual is a ritual. And even when we're preparing the room, when we're preparing our texts, we're already engaging in this process. When we have rituals, there is a moment when we can reflect, when we're still, when we can engage in a conversation with our gods or our nature spirits or a creative force, however we see that divine spirit, that creative spirit. A ritual is the moment when we start connecting. And in those moments of contemplation, or those moments, those magical moments when we are hearing the words or the gestures or seeing, those are the moments when we can be so inspired. But it also, a ritual has a very cathartic effect. A cathartic effect because it's a cleansing, it's a purification. There are many parts of the ritual when we can also look at our own behavior, really look at the way we have interacted. And it's, again, a moment. A ritual is a moment when, I always say, it's the doorway to the spiritual. Again, we forget within this word spiritual, this word ritual is already there. And what is a ritual? We also have the word rite, R-I-T-E, sometimes, but we always say there is always a right, R-I-G-H-T, way to do it. What I'm actually getting at is the fact that when we start connecting on this ritual level, when we're starting to connect with the energies, with the powers, the divine powers, and I use power in the sense of being an energy, we are energized. And connecting again with the moon, we then see how often the moon, if we follow the different phases, that you can actually see sometimes when it's new moon, that's when we said it's the beginning of a cycle. And if we want to start working on things that we want to achieve, and then at full moon, of course, then that energy is then released and we can start working towards, for example, we do a lot of healing work and using those, that energy, which is there for us to utilize. We can do so many things. So when we're talking about the spiritual technology. Oh, I'm going to dry. I have to go and get some water in a minute. See, water, how important it is. When we have these moments of contemplation, moments of meditation, they are the moments that we find our own inner peace. This is one of the reasons that we have rituals, not just for the cathartic effect, but to have that moment of being blessed by the gods. Other rituals which are equally important are what we call rites of passage. Many people will often just go to church to celebrate birth, marriage, death. Recognizable, but really we should be celebrating many different rites of passage. For example, when we have to move from a place that we've lived in for many, many years, there are rituals where we can say we thank the gods, where we thank our community, but also move on and bless the new house where we're moving into. These are rites of passage which are so important for any kind of reconciliation. Again, these rites of passage can also be employed to really balance. In fact, what you're actually doing in these rites of passage is acknowledging those things which we don't always have control over. But why would we want control over those rites of birth? Again, it reminds us of the connection we have with our ancestors, with our tradition, and acknowledging those who have gone before. So what we call the rites of passage, those are our blood rites. And we know when we're talking about family, those blood connections, we always say blood is thicker than water, because we recognize that blood is the thing that binds us all together. So again, just summing up, I encourage everyone, in whatever way you want, to practice things in a more ritualistic sense. And again, follow the moon and see what the moon and the gods and the spirits will tell you if you ask them. Again, it's acknowledging the divine and honoring the divine within and without. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morgana. I was feeling inspired to use the magic diary myself. And actually, yeah, moon is connected to the mind, definitely. Moon is really influencing everybody's lives.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing all this very important information. And unfortunately, we have very little time. And so instead of talking about the importance of spiritual technologies in peace building, you know, like myself being a Hare Krishna, probably many people expect me to push the Hare Krishna as peace building activity, but actually I wanted to use something else because we came across actually our yesterday's panelist Mahatma Prabhu. He shared that amazing technology for compassion, which comes from Buddhist tradition. Uh, and I found it so useful in my work. And I firmly believe that ourselves, all of us, if we want to be serious spiritual practitioners and leaders, we need to have personal um, kind of motto in life or personal policy for ourselves: zero conflicts, zero people we have any problems with, zero grudges, zero resentments, zero negativity. And we know it's all ideal, you know, kind of idea, but I was wondering how many of us can live up to that. And I wanted to share this very powerful affirmation, which really helps. And I will put on the screen very important text. But before we do that, I wanted to suggest to you that if you have any negativity towards anybody in your life, any grudge, any resentment, please use that affirmation coming from one group, which is called Avatar. And here it is. Please meditate on the person whom you have problem with and just do this affirmation. Just tell yourself, but try to do it as consciously as possible, thinking about that person whom you have problem with. Just like me, this person is seeking some happiness for his or her life. Just like me, this person is trying to avoid suffering in his or her life. Just like me, this person has known sadness, loneliness, and despair. Just like me, this person is seeking to fulfill his or her needs. Just like me, this person is learning about life. And so I hope that it helped at least someone. What I will do, I'll put the link to this very wonderful exercise on the chat. And if it helped anyone, you can give your comments on the chat. And so actually, since we have very little time left, we wanted to go into break rooms and let's see whom we will end up by the arrangement of the providence or the supreme power. And I will ask Ishori Rani to place the slide with the questions. we supposed to be asking, and I will request again all the IFAST leaders to facilitate the discussion, make sure that in your group everyone can share the answers on the topic so that we could actually build personal connections with each other and really give each other gift of our attention, appreciation, and start working together, helping each other. So please ask facilitators, please ask your group members these 3 questions, and we're looking forward to see you back to the main group after you finished your association and your discussion. So thank you very much. Looking forward to see you all back with us. All right, so we are waiting for everyone else to join us. Leave your rooms. And then once we get everyone in, we can ask, how was it? How was the experience? Some of our participants still happily sharing with each other. So since we are limited time-wise, those who are here, and I'm really glad to see so many amazing URI leaders with us, Isaac, Thomas, our best friend and well-wisher for so many days, and also Agustina, very enthusiastic youth leader, and Morgana is still with us. It's really wonderful. And so please, if anyone wants to share how that, did you get any gifts? Gift of love, of appreciation, of sharing your hearts with each other, gift of connecting with other participants. How was it for you? If anyone wants to share, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hello, it's Kiran. We had a beautiful opportunity in our group to share peace through the gift of music.
Wow.
So it was such an important way to send healing and goodness across the Zoom call to everyone who was in that room through prayer, through chanting. And so I feel very enriched and feeling really positive and really had a wonderful experience, which, you know, has helped to really clear my mind. And so it's very energetic. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. And we're so honored that you are with us. For those who don't know, Kiran is actually Global Director of the URI at present. And so, of course, she has so many duties to attend, but she found time to honor us with her presence. Thank you, Kiran.
Thank you. And I'm also very proud of iFast International, all of you, for really hitting the ground running and organizing these important calls and sessions where we continue to learn and listen. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
With your support, Kiran, it all started with you, and with your blessings, we can do anything. Thank you. So anyone else wants to share your feelings, your thoughts, your experiences? Please don't be shy, unmute yourself and share with us.
I would like to share what we spoke about in our small group.
Please, Sophia.
I was in the same group with Rajamali, Isaac, and Augustina. So we had like a youth group, and we spoke about the fact that conflict resolution, it always starts with individual people. So before we solve conflicts outside, we need to look inside of ourselves and see, can we solve conflicts with the people that are close to us, with our family, with our friends, and with ourselves? Do we hold grudges against ourselves? Are we in peace with ourselves first? And then if everybody in this society does this and looks within to find peace within first, it will be easier to rise together as a society. And another point that was raised is the fact that actually, if we look at conflicts in a way that it's a lesson, it's something to be learned from, we can always come out of conflicts being stronger, smarter, wiser, just being a better person, a better human in general. So this was our main point about starting with ourselves individually, looking within, finding peace within to be the change that we want to see in the world. So that was our discussion in our group.
Thank you, Sophia. From inner peace to world peace. That's excellent formula. I see Trata from Indonesia. He wants to say a few words. And I mean, he's an amazing person. I know him personally, being to Bali many times. So please, Trataji, share with us your realizations. Dr. Tri Astawa.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Sagar Soy Maharaj, and thank you for everyone. We are from the groups. I forgot what group number. We have 4 members. One of them is Valerie, and one of Bakil, and then Sudevi and myself. They want me to represent our group because I have, on the last of our conversation, they asked me to share our own conflicts also. So I use also, I will use this opportunity to have some advice from others, to post my own conflict, also to get advice maybe from others. But before that, we want to share what we discussed. Yes, if we have conflicts, we have maybe whether we will avoid the avoid to have the conflicts. Their suggestion: don't be afraid to have a conflict. Just face the conflict, but learn how to resolve the conflicts and manage them, and then put the level. Yeah, in what level we will resolve the conflicts. So if the small level, we can use the small means, but if the big conflicts, we have to use the big or more organized like this. So maybe sometimes the conflict is very small, like in the families, like between daughters, and conflicts of ideas of different members of the families. But sometimes not to argue what is good, what is bad, but sometimes different appreciations maybe will solve the conflicts, uh, uh, like giving presents like that. So we just shift to other things which is more valuable, more important, but this become solving the conflicts. Yes, we agree that if we listen to each others, which give us opportunity to solve the conflicts. And from my own conflicts, which is now I'm facing, that's because the other Valerie asked me, "What is your own conflicts present now?" So I share to them that I have a conflict in the schools among me, my wife, and my brother, who is like we are managing the schools. We have different opinion about whether we are hiring a consultant to improve our school or not. Only me and my wife, we just agreed to have a consultant, but the other party, there are 4 principals, and then there are executive board, there is advisory boards. They all not agree with having the consultants. So I have already discussed with them one by one, but they're not openly opposing what my idea. But because later on I know that they are speaking behind, that they not agree, then some of them make a petition, will make a letter that this consultant is bad. So this consultant is on a meeting with the teachers, make a comments, which is they use it to argue that or opposing the idea of using these consultants, even though we understand it, his experience. So what I'm doing is, because this is not healthy, I resigned from the organization, but not to neglect the responsibility to schools, only because the idea of the school is very good. So we will support the school from outside. But meanwhile, the conflict is not resolved yet. My my decision is to postpone first the conflict until we all become peaceful. So I summarize what I'm thinking. The way to resolve some conflict is to uh, like stabilize or make everyone peace for some time, and then until when we are peace, then we discuss what is to how to solve these problems. This is already just now shared by Sophia. Yeah. Yeah. If we are ourselves is not peaceful, how can we make a resolution for the conflicts? I think that I can share, Maharaj. Thank you.
Thank you, Trata Prabhu. And yeah, I'll be happy to help you as trained mediator if you need my help with conflicts. But actually, I see Rebecca in here, and she is heading the CC, which is dealing with the conflict in Israel. And Israelis are really amazing people. I've been to this country so many times. And the greatest way for them to resolve conflicts in their lives is not to take them seriously, because they've been in conflict situation for so many years. And the greatest Israeli way to solve any problems is jokes. So when they face conflicts, they just joke and conflicts evaporate. I see Veronica raising her hand. Please share, but please be very brief because we have very little time.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, well,
Veronica.
Well,
Rebecca, you can go next.
okay, I'll go ahead.
Thank you.
In my own group, I'll summarize what we shared, that the factors that contributed to around our experiences, our cultures and values made us to what we are today. And because of it, we want to make a change. And we say that this change has to start from individual self. Individual self, then move to family, siblings, then the larger community. And we now say that the world has become so diversified in religion, and there is need now to people of different faiths to come together to understand themselves, understand their beliefs, the basics of their beliefs, in order to relate better and for peace to reign in our society. And I gave a sharing of Women's Interfaith Council, which creates a platform for women of different faith groups to come together in sincere dialogue to talk about issues that concern them. And we said that dialogue is dialogue is a holy ground, and a holy ground that requires humility, emptying ourselves, opening ourselves, and dropping our slippers and shoe in order to understand each other and listen to each other and live together, understand each other and live together. And we also said that what we need, ideal in the society is to have a one family, a society, a community that live together in love. Love should be our language. Our language, that when we love, we don't think of evil about the other. What we want is good of the other. So our language should be love. That's our ideal that we want in our society today, where everyone live together irrespective of their differences in love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And Rebecca, if you can share in a minute or maximum two, please unmute yourself. And next one is Mahatma Prabhu, if you want, if you can share as well.
So after me, okay. So we discussed the, okay, so I was the only one who wasn't in iFast itself, which is an amazing group. It's really amazing what you are doing, how you are bringing all the other your ICCs together on so many different various areas. What we discussed in terms of the applications of spiritual technology is the fact that Israel-Palestine is theologically, the theological framework says that it's a family fight. It's a fight that's still within the family. The connection is Abrahamic connection, is also monotheism. The main parties are Jews, Muslims, and yes, there is a significant percentage of both Palestinians and Israelis who are Christians. They have their own place in that. There are also other smaller religions like Druze and Samaritans. And so but what they all have in common is that they are part of the larger family, which is why they have this connection to the land. And so focusing on that, focusing on their love of the land is where we come from in terms of spiritual technology.
All right. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for sharing your work, and we wish you all the best. So, thank you. Mahatma Prabhu, if you could share a few words, your best realization from today. Please unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
We spoke about a lot of the things that others spoke. You have to change yourself to change others, and you have to understand others and get out of yourself. And we talked about really getting to know people is a really important part of solving conflict. And the more you can relate to them as human beings rather than as people on two different sides. Rebecca, I heard that in Israel they have this program where you can Israelis can call Palestinians and Palestinians can call Israelis. Is that true? And then you get to know the people that way?
There are, well, I don't know which specific program you're referring to, but there are a lot of programs in there that, and also outside of the country, that have setups like that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So I've seen that personally also, that works. So, and then the other thing we talked about was food. And Rick has a program. It's called Piece of Pizza for Peace. So he said, if pizza's in your hand, you have to put your weapon down to eat it. So he's got this program to distribute pizza, piece of pizza for peace.org, something like that. Yeah. And, you know, then I was joking. I said, yeah, if your mouth is full of pizza, you can't argue because you're eating. And I told him that I've seen this happen on many, many occasions. Of course, in our organization, we offer spiritualized food, but still, I've seen in so many occasions how it changes people because it's, eating is social and it brings you closer together. And this one organization had all kinds of problems, so the CEO brought everyone together for breakfast. And for 1 month, just take breakfast together, and they solved all their problems during breakfast, and that wasn't even the agenda. It was just to have breakfast together. So I think that underscores how important the personal relationship is, and how we judge one another. We don't know what one another are like. I'm a white American Jewish man, so bing, 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 right? You got all kinds of ideas what that means, right? And you're from Kazakhstan, so I've got my ideas, and you're from India or wherever. So we really talked about breaking those barriers down of all this prejudice that's so deeply rooted within us, which I think is often at the core of all of this. So we talked about more, but I'll keep it simple.
All right. Thank you very much, Mahatma Prabhu, for sharing. And so we are coming to unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our lovely association, but we want to see all of you back, and tomorrow we'll be discussing something which is very important, and maybe Kishori Rani, who is tirelessly working behind the scenes to make it all smooth, can tell us a little more about tomorrow's topic. Remind us about tomorrow's topic. Kishori Rani, please tell us what are we
I
going
need to remind myself. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find our agenda. Give me 1 second, please. And tomorrow we have interfaith dialogue. Very interesting topic. It's actually we're touching every day, but tomorrow we have amazing people like Kiran Bali, Maria Crespa, Karimah Strauch, and Rukmini Walter. We will send a flyer to everyone, and please join us tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Kishori Rani, for all your hard work as well. You deserve a lot of appreciation for being invisible support for all of us. And so we're looking forward for all of you to join us tomorrow and discuss this is really key topic of interfaith collaboration. How can we together help the world to be a better place? So thank you all very much. And I'm looking forward to see all of you tomorrow.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Kiran.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Bye.